While you were distracted by trade wars and tariff headlines, China just pulled off one of the most significant resource grabs in modern history. President Xi Jinping has quietly locked up lithium reserves across Central Asia. And here is the terrifying part. Western automakers are already shutting down production lines because they cannot get the minerals they need. This is not some distant future problem. This is happening right now. Ford halted production of its Explorer SUV. Suzuki stopped making the Swift. German and Austrian component plants went dark. And while the West scrambles, China is building an empire of energy minerals that could determine who dominates the 21st century economy. If you want to understand what is really happening in the global power struggle over critical minerals, you are in the right place. But before we dive in, if you find this kind of analysis valuable, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to understand what is really going on behind the scenes. Trust me, by the end of this video, you will see the world very differently. Let me paint you a picture of what just happened. In June 2025, President Xi Jinping traveled to Astana, Kazakhstan, for the second China-Central Asia Summit. He met with the leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. On the surface, it looked like standard diplomatic photo opportunities and vague promises of eternal friendship. But behind closed doors, something far more consequential was taking place. China was cementing its grip on one of the most mineral-rich regions on the planet. The numbers are absolutely staggering. In just the first half of 2025, China invested a record $124 billion in Belt and Road Initiative projects. That is more than they spent in all of 2024 combined. And here is what should really grab your attention. Central Asia received $25 billion of that investment, with Kazakhstan alone attracting $23 billion. But this was not about building roads and bridges. 60% of those mining deals were concentrated in one country, Kazakhstan, a nation sitting on reserves of 15 different rare earth elements. Let me break down why this matters. The clean energy transition, everyone keeps talking about runs on critical minerals. Electric vehicles need lithium for batteries, rare earth elements for motors, and cobalt for energy storage. Wind turbines require neodymium and dysprosium. Solar panels depend on gallium and germanium. And here is the uncomfortable truth. China controls virtually all of it. They produce about 18% of the world's mined lithium, but their real power comes from refining. Chinese companies control 65% of global lithium chemical processing and over 75% of battery cell production. Even when lithium is mined in Australia or Chile, most of it ends up in Chinese refineries before it becomes anything useful. Now, while the West was busy debating tariffs and trade policy, Xi Jinping was playing a completely different game. He was not just buying minerals, he was buying countries. In 2022 and 2023, Kazakhstan signed multiple strategic agreements with Chinese companies to develop rare earth and battery-related minerals, including lithium and beryllium. These deals prioritize political relationships over open competition. No Western bidders were allowed. No environmental oversight was required. Just handshake deals between Beijing and Astana that locked up resources for decades. Uzbekistan tells a similar story. In 2023, Tashkent signed a major lithium development deal with a Chinese firm that bypassed local environmental review and excluded Western companies entirely. Recent geological surveys have identified significant deposits of tungsten, lithium, germanium, and 14 rare earth element sites. And guess who's positioned to develop them? Not American companies, not European firms. Chinese state-backed enterprises with deep pockets and patient capital. But here is where the story gets really interesting. China is not just securing supply, they are actively weaponizing it. In April 2025, Beijing imposed export controls on 7 heavy rare earth elements, along with all related compounds, metals, and magnets. The official reason? To prevent misuse in military and sensitive sectors. The real reason? Leverage. Pure and simple leverage over the West. The impact was immediate and devastating. In May 2025, rare earth magnet shipments from China fell by 74% compared to the previous year. Ford shut down production of its Explorer SUV at its Chicago plant for an entire week because of rare earth shortages. Suzuki halted production of its Swift car. Multiple auto supplier plants across Germany and Austria were forced to close. The European Association of Automotive Suppliers reported a mere 25% success rate in securing export licenses from China. Let me say that again. 3 out of 4 applications were rejected. And it was not just Europe feeling the pain. In India, the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers warned that auto industry production could come to a grinding halt by early June. Maruti Suzuki, Mahindra, and Tata Motors were all operating with limited inventories. Japan's Nissan acknowledged they were scrambling to find alternatives. Even the mighty German automakers, BMW, Volkswagen, and Mercedes-Benz, were forced to admit their supply chains were being tested like never before. Think about what this means. China can essentially turn off the lights for Western manufacturing whenever it wants. They have built a system where even if you mine lithium in Australia or rare earths in the United States, you still need Chinese refineries to process them into usable materials. That is not an accident. That is a decades-long strategy executed with precision and patience. Now, some people will tell you the West is waking up. They will point to initiatives like the Minerals Security Partnership, which brings together 14 countries plus the European Union. They will mention the Thacker Pass lithium mine in Nevada, which is supposed to produce 40,000 tons of lithium annually when it finally comes online in 2027 or 2028. They will talk about the $2.26 billion loan package from the U.S. Department of Energy. And sure, these are steps in the right direction. But here is the problem. The math does not work. Right now, the United States produces less than 5,000 metric tons of lithium annually. That is less than 2% of global supply. Even when Thacker Pass reaches full capacity, it will only produce enough lithium for about 800,000 electric vehicles per year. Sounds impressive until you realize China has already locked up supply chains that can produce tens of millions of batteries annually. The U.S. is bringing a water pistol to a gunfight, and timing matters enormously here. Thacker Pass will not even start production until late 2027 at the earliest. Meanwhile, China invested $24.9 billion in metals and mining projects in just the first 6 months of 2025 alone. That is more than any full year on record. They are not waiting. They are not planning for the future. They are building the future right now, while the West holds committee meetings and publishes strategy documents. The Belt and Road Initiative has become China's secret weapon in this mineral war. What started in 2013 as an infrastructure development program has evolved into a sophisticated resource acquisition machine. Since its launch, China has signed deals worth $1.4 trillion across 150 countries. And in 2025, they hit new records. The initiative logged $213 billion in new deals, a 75% increase from 2024. But look at where that money is going. Metals and mining reached $32.6 billion in 2025, with 60% concentrated in Kazakhstan. Technology and manufacturing hit $23.2 billion, including investments in electric vehicle batteries and solar panel production. Africa received $39 billion, with Central Asia right behind at $25 billion. These are not random investments. They are strategic moves designed to control the entire supply chain from mine to battery to vehicle. Consider Xi Mining Group, one of China's largest mining companies. In 2025, they completed a $1.2 billion purchase of Kazakhstan's Regrodok gold mine. But gold is just the beginning. Xi Jinping is also in talks to acquire Zonga Mining, a company with significant lithium resources valued at $6.4 billion. Their goal? 300,000 tons of lithium production by 2028. That is more than the entire current output of the Western world combined. The competition for Central Asia is heating up, but China has a massive head start. Japan announced a 5-year goal for $19 billion in Central Asian business projects at their December 2025 summit. The European Union pledged nearly $3 billion under its Global Gateway initiative. The United States signed memoranda of understanding with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. But here is the reality check. Chinese capital flows in Central Asia dwarf everything the West has committed. And the infrastructure to move those minerals, the railways, the roads, the pipelines, that is largely financed by Chinese and Russian capital too. Let me tell you about the market manipulation that makes this whole situation even worse. China does not just control supply, they actively manipulate prices to destroy competition. Between May 2022 and May 2025, cobalt prices fell nearly 60%. Nickel prices collapsed by 73%. Global lithium prices dropped by almost 90% from their peaks in late 2022. Why does this matter? Because when prices crash, Western mines cannot stay profitable. In 2023, Jervois opened the only cobalt mine in the United States, in Idaho. By the end of that same year, they were forced to close it because prices had collapsed so far that operations became uneconomical. BHP shuttered its Nickel West operations in Australia. Glencore closed its Koniambo facility in New Caledonia. These are not small players. These are some of the biggest mining companies in the world, and they cannot compete with Chinese state-subsidized producers willing to operate at negative profit margins. This is economic warfare, plain and simple. Chinese state-owned enterprises can sustain losses indefinitely because they are backed by government support. They flood markets with excess supply, drive prices below the cost of production, watch Western competitors shut down, and then raise prices once they have eliminated the competition. Is a playbook straight out of the 1980s, when China did the same thing with rare earths and turned a fragmented global industry into a Chinese monopoly. The rare earth story is a cautionary tale the West apparently failed to learn from. Back in the 1980s, the United States was actually the world's leading rare earth producer. Mountain Pass Mine in California was the global center of the industry. But then China entered the market with state-subsidized production, crashed prices, and drove competitors out of business. By the 2000s, China controlled over 90% of global rare earth production. When they briefly restricted exports in 2010 during a diplomatic dispute with Japan, the world suddenly woke up to how vulnerable they were. Prices spiked. Panic ensued. And then everyone went back to sleep while China consolidated even further. Now in 2025, China produces more than 90% of the world's processed rare earths and rare earth magnets. They hold a monopoly on the separation of dysprosium and terbium, elements critical for manufacturing permanent magnets that can withstand high temperatures. These magnets are not luxury items. They are essential components in F-35 fighter jet actuators, Tesla's humanoid robots, and Virginia-class submarines. The defense implications alone should keep Pentagon planners up at night. And Beijing is not stopping there. In October 2025, China announced even stricter export controls on rare earths. The new rules require foreign companies to obtain licenses to export any parts, components, or assemblies containing Chinese-sourced rare earth materials. Starting December 2025, these controls apply even to products made outside China if they contain Chinese materials or were manufactured using Chinese technologies. Think about what that means. A component made in Germany using Chinese rare earths could require a Chinese export license to sell anywhere in the world. Beijing has effectively claimed jurisdiction over global supply chains. The International Energy Agency has been sounding the alarm for years, but nobody seems to be listening. Their Global Critical Minerals Outlook shows that for 19 out of 20 strategic minerals, China is the leading refiner with an average market share of 70%. And that concentration has only intensified in recent years. The IEA warns that lithium demand may double by 2030, potentially reaching over 1.3 million tons of lithium carbonate equivalent annually. Without new mines and processing capacity, global shortages could return, leading to price spikes that impact battery and EV production worldwide. But here is the frustrating part. Western governments knew this was coming. Reports have been warning about mineral dependency for over a decade. The playbook China used was obvious to anyone paying attention. And yet, here we are in 2025, watching automakers halt production because they cannot get rare earth magnets, while China signs another multi-billion-dollar mining deal in Kazakhstan. Meanwhile, China's advantages compound daily. Their companies have spent years investing in overseas mines across Australia, Chile, Argentina, and Africa. They control the patents, the equipment, and the trained workforce needed to expand production. And they have no debt crisis, no congressional gridlock, no competing interest groups slowing down their industrial policy. When Beijing decides to secure a resource, they secure it. Period. So what happens next? Some experts advocate for tariffs on Chinese imports. But here is the problem. The United States accounts for only about 1.7% of rare earth consumption, 3% of gallium, 3.6% of cobalt, and 5% of nickel. Unilateral American tariffs will not move global markets when China can simply sell to everyone else. Any effective strategy would require coordination with Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada, and other major consuming countries. And so far that coordination has been painfully slow. Others suggest building an anchor market among allied nations, a unified bloc that could harmonize tariffs, implement quotas requiring mineral inputs for member countries, and strengthen investment screening to prevent Chinese acquisitions. The Minerals Security Partnership and G7 plus Australia framework could provide the foundation for such cooperation. Together, these countries represent a market of nearly 3 billion people, double China's population. The truth is, we are watching a historic shift in global power that most people do not even recognize is happening. The 20th century was defined by oil. Wars were fought over it. Nations rose and fell based on who controlled the wells. The 21st century will be defined by critical minerals. Lithium, rare earths, cobalt, and nickel will determine who can build electric vehicles, advanced weapons systems, renewable energy infrastructure, and artificial intelligence hardware. And right now, China is winning this competition decisively. President Xi Jinping understood this before anyone else. When he launched the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, many dismissed it as a vanity project. When China began acquiring mining assets around the world, analysts called a search for returns on excess capital. When Beijing invested in seemingly obscure lithium deposits in Central Asia, the business press barely noticed. But she was playing a longer game, building the infrastructure of dominance one deal at a time. Now, as Western automakers shut down production lines and defense planners scramble for secure supply chains, the consequences of that strategic vision are becoming painfully clear. China does not need to fire a single bullet to bring Western economies to their knees. They just need to delay export licenses for a few critical minerals. This is the new Cold War, and is being fought not with missiles but with mining permits. Not with sanctions, but with supply chains. Not with military alliances, but with infrastructure investments. And right now, the scoreboard heavily favors Beijing. If you found this analysis valuable, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with friends and family who need to understand what is really happening in the global struggle over critical minerals. These stories do not get enough attention in mainstream media, but they will shape the world your children and grandchildren inherit. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.